Okay, so it has been a while since I have done a video like this here, seeing how it is that we're doing primarily video essay type content, or have been since about June of this year, but I feel like I need to come in here and give you guys my thoughts on a film that was released a little over a week ago. Of course, that film being The Smashing Machine, and kind of give a little bit of pushback on some of the takes that have came out here recently, while at the same time giving you guys an idea of how I think the current landscape of film and movies can kind of fix itself going forward, given the fact that we are now in the era of slop, and seeing how it is that a lot of these movie companies have found ways to, let's just say, alienate potential fan bases and their current fan base. I think it's time that we do a bit of a video on this, so make sure you guys stick around for the full bit. Now, before we talk about The Smashing Machine, two very, very quick things. These two videos right here from MMA On Point. There's also going to be a couple of other videos in the description box as well. Will be linked there. One video kind of explains how it is that they kind of came to making this film, and the other one talks about how they should have actually made the film, because as you guys know, the film The Smashing Machine, which came out last Friday, was a literal box office flop. However, the thing about this particular box office flop is this here. This right here was not a film that was made, that was designed to actually garner a massive audience. It was The Rock's attempt at trying to do a serious film that might get him an Oscar nomination, maybe sometime next year. And of course, I'm going to go ahead and tell you guys now that even though he did a pretty good job in this, his performance was actually, I'd say his performance was pretty good given his current range as an actor. I would say that more than likely it will probably not happen. However, there is one person in this film that may garner a nomination, so make sure you guys stick around for that there as we talk about The Smashing Machine. And that second thing I wanted to bring up was there's not really anything to spoil. Chances are, if you went to go see the movie The Smashing Machine, you probably already knew about the source material of said film. Chances are you probably knew the story of a former UFC fighter, Pride fighter, champion, and of course also pioneer of the sport of MMA, Mark Kerr. Chances are you probably already knew about this man. Chances are you probably knew that this man at one point in time was locked up against Kurt Angle going into the 1996 Olympics. He was an alternate, several gold medals. Of course, he was never at the Olympics, but national championships, world, junior, that type of stuff there. The guy was an actual legit athlete. He also won a Vale Tudo tournament, 3 fights in one night, and then he also won 2 consecutive UFC tournaments, which, of course, this right here is back in the day when the UFC adopted the whole Grand Prix format. That's another reason why I'm going to be linking this video right here from Napoleon Bonaparte in the description box as well. And by the way, some of the B-roll footage that you guys are going to be seeing, which of course is going to be intermittent throughout the entire video, is from some of his content and some of the stuff from MMA On Point, while at the same time also trailers from the film The Smashing Machine itself. So we do have a little bit to talk about, so let us go ahead and kind of dive into this. So like I said, this right here was not a movie that was designed to give, let's just say it was not exactly a movie that was designed to make a bunch of money. It was a passion project from The Rock. Of course, the MMA On Point video kind of explains how that came to be. And by the way, there was actually an attempt at trying to make this film back in 2007 involving Jean-Claude Van Damme. Very, very interesting. Also, another video that we linked in the description box, this is from WatchMojo.com, because there was actually stuff in this particular film that I did not think was real. That turned out to actually be real. And I'm no super MMA fan. I know a little bit, but still though, stuff like, for example, Dawn Staples, the girlfriend, trying to end her own life. Yeah, that actually happened. That right there was not just done for dramatic effect inside the film, but still. The basis of this film was a documentary that came out, I think, in 2001. It may have been 2000, The Smashing Machine, based on the life and times of extreme fighter Mark Kerr, who, as I mentioned earlier, fought in the UFC, even won a couple of tournaments in the UFC back when it was tournament format, Grand Prix format, and then eventually he fought in Pride FC. Now, quick thing I want to go ahead and kind of throw out there, this was just my own personal little nugget. In the early days, and I came up when MMA really began to take off, and I'm talking about 1998, 1999. Yeah, I'm an old fart. Yes, most of you guys already know this. I'm getting old. But the early 2000s, on Fox Sports Net, we would get Pride fighting. Pride in its heyday was a superior product over the UFC. The UFC did not begin to start getting good until right around 2002, 2003, and Pride would eventually find itself out of business. Part of the reason why it is going to be linking that Napoleon Bonaparte Supercut video on Pride FC in the description box. Yes, it's roughly right around 3 hours, but it's a pretty good documentary on how, also very, very comedic and entertaining, on how it was that Pride came to be and then how it was that Pride eventually fell. But still, getting back on track. This movie was based upon that documentary. Now, it's not bit for bit an actual copy of it, and it does come off as boring from time to time. But certain little bits, for example, were in the documentary that were in fact in the film. Like, for example, Mark Kerr's training with Bass Rutten, who, by the way, had a pretty good performance. I'm not gonna lie. Ryan Bader's first time ever acting, former UFC fighter, Bellator champion. He got to play the role of Mark Coleman. He actually did a pretty good job for a guy who's not an actor. Just saying. The Rock's performance, on the other hand, well, if you see Mark Kerr and then you look at The Rock, you almost think to yourself that there is no way in the world that you can get past the fact that this right here is not Mark Kerr. That this right here is just kind of like a fill-in for him that's not even really, really a good one. And it even comes off as a little bit distracting. However, I got to say this right now. I thought that The Rock's performance as Mark Kerr was actually pretty good, given the fact that if you know about Mark Kerr, then you know that in reality, he's really just kind of a gentle giant. That was, for the most part, what Mark was. What was? Super nice guy. That kind of came out weird, but I'm not going to go back and re-edit it out. Just how I am. I do these videos raw. Mark was sort of that guy that it took a lot to kind of piss him off. He was very, very intense, obviously, inside the ring, but he obviously knew how to separate that right there from his out-of-the-ring personality. Still, though, the point is this right here. Given the trials and tribulations that he went through, it's kind of sad that he would end up spending a good chunk of his life with a woman like what he spent with. Now, I'm not going to do this right here to defame that woman. That right there is not what I'm doing. I'm not trying to trash her or anything. But in real life, these two were toxic together. She was a very, very toxic person. And by the way, if there is somebody that does garner any form of potential Academy Award nomination, Golden Globe or whatever, it's probably going to be Emily Blunt and her portrayal as Dawn Staples. Let me explain. Now, I'm not here to talk about how Emily Blunt is like super attractive or anything like that. That's not what I'm doing. However, in this movie right here, I could see how it is that someone like Mark or any other man who's single would kind of fall for a woman like this. She hits every single note that you would apparently want in an actual girlfriend. The problem is this right here. Sometimes that could be a little bit toxic, and this woman was in fact toxic. Emily Blunt played the role of Dawn Staples very, very well. And if you watch the original documentary, then you'll know exactly how toxic this woman can get. There's actually a part in the film that came up in the documentary that I knew for a fact was going to come back up in the film, because you can't have the film without this part. And that right there is when Mark went to go fight in Japan to fight Igor Vachichin. Now, you'll see more of that there in the videos from Napoleon Bonaparte, but Mark had a fight with a guy named Igor Vachichin in which the rules were explained to him before the fight, and Mark sort of, let's just put it this way here. Igor didn't exactly follow the rules in that fight. He took a lot of very, very bad shots to the top of his head, and it was ruled a victory for Igor Vachichin. Now, of course, they would overturn this victory and make it a no contest, but even in that case there, you still feel like what Mark felt in the film, like a bit of a loser. What's interesting, though, is that in the documentary, and this where it happened, of course, in the film, was that Dawn Staples was actually inside the locker room before the fight. Having your wives, girlfriends, the way they look, the smell, great, you look phenomenal, it has a tendency to break a person's concentration, and it sort of seemed to do that in Mark's case going into that fight. That's the kind of effect that she had on him in the fight. Now, he goes home, he goes through rehab, get some help for the addictions that he has, which was mostly to painkillers. And by the way, the film does do a pretty good job of sort of copying the documentary when Mark is trying to score much, much more powerful medications to help him out with pain, opioids, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And he does go to rehab. But going into the next fight against Enson Inoue, where he was getting trained actually much, much more thoroughly, and also the documentation of Mark's time inside the hospital, which I thought was kind of lacking because there's more of that in the original documentary. Like, for example, when Mark says that he was asked who's the president of the United States, and he said Ronald Reagan. That actually happened. If you watch the documentary, the original documentary, which we'll probably have to go get on DVD, you see that Mark really and truly was that much out of it due to his drug addiction. Mark went to rehab, got squared away, and then to turn right back after that, he went and fought Enson Inoue, and he won. Well, most importantly, there was a certain person not involved at this point in time to actually cause any distractions, and that person, of course, was his girlfriend, Dawn Staples. Speaking of that right there brings me to something very, very interesting that needs to be said. I kind of left out. I want to go ahead and throw this out here right now. The original documentary, the truth about the documentary, you guys will see it in the MMA On Point video, is that the documentary was only supposed to be right around 40 minutes long, and it was actually directed by Hollywood director Peter Hyams' son. What happened was that after Mark's no contest, his loss to Igor Vicinchin, the camera crew was like, we may have something here. Mark is a much, much more complex guy than this. What if we were actually to do this right here much longer and turn it to a much, much larger documentary? That's kind of how the Smashing Machine kind of came to be. But moving on, after the instant Inouye fight, well, Mark screwed up. He allowed the toxic woman to come back into his life. And I'll go ahead and say it one more time. Emily Blunt plays an extremely good toxic woman. That's really what I'm going to say. She's attractive enough. She dresses a certain way enough. She acts a certain way of a chick that you would, in fact, fall in love with. That, of course, would turn out to be good old-fashioned bad news. I felt the performances in this movie were actually pretty good. It was not a movie that was designed to be a box office smash. It was designed to be a performance piece. A lot like a movie that's going to be coming out here in the next couple of weeks on another figure in U.S. pop culture history who has found a way to upset any fans that might be interested in watching a biopic on him. But we'll talk about that there in another video. Now, guys, I didn't just make this video just to talk about the Smashing Machine, but my closing thoughts on it is this right here. And I understand that the movie has been out for over a week, so chances are you probably may have already seen it. And, of course, if you want to go watch it, just know that it's, for the most part, exactly like the original documentary. So there's nothing really to spoil here. We all know what the hell ends up happening. But this right here needs to be said. Once again, this right here was not some movie that was designed to be a box office smash, and I understand that The Rock is kind of, with the whole Maui situation and recent takes over the past few years, I understand why his name has kind of been tarnished a little bit, at least as far as core audience is concerned, but I really think that the man did actually put together a pretty good performance. It just so happens to be that he put together a pretty good performance at a point in time where you're probably going to see better performances out there. Makes you almost wonder what would have happened if Baz Luhrmann's Elvis had been released in the fall of 2003 rather than the early summer of 2003. Just saying. Still, though, at the same time, though, it kind of leads me to how Hollywood could kind of fix itself. Now, I'm going to touch on this very, very briefly. I'm going to make a much, much larger video later on down the road, giving a much, much more detailed explanation on this, so bear with me for a second. Right now, we're living in an era of slop. We're living in an era where nothing that's coming out is good, or whatever could be good is somewhat stretched. Like for example, the Bob Dylan flick, A Complete Unknown, that came out like over a year ago. That wasn't accurate, not one little bit. And of course, we've also got MGM having now control, well, not MGM, but Amazon having full control of the Bond franchise, and now they're looking for another Bond. When in reality, what should have happened is that Daniel Craig should not have been allowed to kill the character off. But still, this right here would be a good opportunity for Hollywood to look at the overall landscape and say to themselves, you know what? Maybe we should try putting out films that are a little bit different. Maybe we should try putting out more sports dramas. The world of wrestling itself on its own, sports entertainment and MMA both, is ripe for all kinds of stories. You know, the world of wrestling, you've got Ric Flair. Of course, they wanted to cut the whole Hulk Hogan drama because he's a Trump voter, but still, at the same time, there's lots of stories you could draw from. Bruiser Brody, the Montreal Screwjob, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. You got a lot to go into. Why not make biopics on that? I mean, you did make one a while back on, the Von Erich curse, even though they completely missed an entire brother. But still, though, the point is this right here. Hollywood could save itself if they went into the world of sports, and also not only sports, but also if they went back into the crime thriller, crime genre, and actually made it, let's just say, historically based films. They could probably find a way to get back into it, as well as also re-update the horror catalog, and maybe even kick in some reboots. I'm not exactly against reboots if they're done correctly, but still, though, I think that Hollywood could find a way to save themselves during this era of slop tube, and I also think something else that needs to be explored is the war epic and the war genre, especially given what's going on today with wars in, say, between Russia and Ukraine. And of course, even though we had this little thing with Israel-Gaza, yeah, I think it would be a good idea for Hollywood to kind of tap into that. If they can kind of keep the politics in check, then I think they might be able to find a way to save themselves. But then again, at the same time, though, it's almost like trying to I don't know. Sometimes trying to explain to these people how to save themselves is kind of a pointless venture. But still, though, I hope they kind of turn the corner because I have a feeling that we're going to need some form of entertainment over the next few years. Now, with that right there being said, I'm going to go ahead and close this video down, minus maybe just a couple of quick updates. But still, though, if you go watch the film The Smashing Machine, just know right away that this right here was a film that was made for Oscar season, and it was designed to obviously get somebody an Academy Award that they probably will not win anyways. Still, though, it is a solid film. I would go give it a look, especially if you're interested in Mark Kerr, if you're interested in MMA as a whole or sports biopics. It's not a bad one. Make sure you guys go check it out. But let me end the video on just a couple of very, very quick updates. So, Sunday, the next part in my American History X series, which will be on the character of Danny, that right there will be released. This video right here will be coming out on Friday. That video will be coming out on Sunday. When that is over with, there's going to be the third part, and then I'm going to be adding a fourth part to it, which is going to be on Tony Kaye's vision for the film. Tony Kaye's vision for the film is part 3. Part 4 is going to be looking at the characters of Sweeney and also Dennis Vineyard, the dad. Kind of explore the themes a little bit deeper. November, on the other hand, there's going to be one film that's going to be explored, and it's probably going to be about 3 takes. I'm also going to be looking at the book as well, and that right there is going to be on the film American Psycho. So make sure you guys stick around for all of that there. With that right there being said, if you guys can still, please hit the like button, subscribe, share, sign off in the comments. I would love to get you guys' thoughts on not only the video, but also the movie as well. And I'll see you guys later.